You've tried everything: meditation apps, cold showers, motivational videos at 3 in the morning. You set rules for yourself. No more scrolling, no more junk food, no more procrastination. And by noon, you've broken every single one. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're just fighting self-control the wrong way. What if I told you that centuries ago, samurai warriors mastered a method of self-discipline so powerful that it didn't require willpower at all? A system so counterintuitive that it was kept hidden from outsiders, taught only within the walls of the dojo, passed down through whispered instructions and lived experience. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how this forbidden training actually worked. And by the end, you'll understand why everything you've been told about self-control has been backwards. If this resonates with you, subscribe. And when you feel that moment of recognition, that instant, where you see yourself in this story, leave a comment with the single word that describes what you're struggling to control. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The day everything changed. Takeshi sat alone in his apartment, staring at his hands. They were trembling, not from fear, not from cold, but from the shame of another failure. He had promised himself, again, that today would be different. No compulsive checking of his phone, no eating late at night, no disappearing into distractions when work became difficult. And yet, here he was at 11 at night, surrounded by empty food containers, his phone battery at 6% from endless scrolling, and tomorrow's deadline untouched. His reflection in the darkened computer screen looked hollow. 31 years old. A job he was about to lose. Relationships he'd let dissolve because he couldn't show up consistently. His younger sister had stopped calling. His mother asked fewer questions each time they spoke, her voice carrying that particular sadness of someone who'd stopped expecting change. The worst part wasn't the failure itself. It was the familiarity of it. This exact moment had happened dozens of times. The same crushing realization, the same promises to himself, the same complete collapse within hours or days. He'd read every productivity book, watched every motivational speech, tried every habit tracking app. Nothing stuck, nothing changed. And deep down, in a place he barely admitted existed, Takeshi had started to believe he was simply incapable of self-control. He thought about his grandfather, who'd passed away 5 years earlier, a man who'd lived with such precision, such quiet discipline, that even his final days had been arranged exactly as he'd planned. Takeshi remembered visiting him as a child, watching how his grandfather moved through each day with deliberate grace, tea prepared the same way each morning, garden tended at the same hour, never rushing, never scattered. How had that man and Takeshi come from the same blood? That night, Takeshi couldn't sleep. He pulled out an old box from his closet, filled with his grandfather's belongings that his mother had given him. Letters, photographs, and at the bottom a thin journal with a worn leather cover. He'd never opened it before. Inside, the handwriting was careful, steady. The first entry was dated 50 years earlier, and it began with a single sentence that made Takeshi's breath catch. "I met the teacher today. He told me I would never have self-control until I stopped trying to control myself." Chapter 2. The Teacher's Paradox. The journal told a story Takeshi had never heard. His grandfather, at age 25, had been exactly like him. Impulsive, scattered, unable to maintain discipline for more than a few days, ashamed of his weakness. He'd sought out a reclusive teacher, an elderly man who'd trained in an old samurai tradition, living in a small house on the edge of Kyoto. Takeshi read his grandfather's words. "I arrived expecting lessons in willpower, exercises to strengthen my resolve. Instead, the teacher served me tea and said nothing for 20 minutes. When I finally asked what I should do, he smiled and said, "Tomorrow morning, place your shoes by the door before you sleep. That's all. Do nothing else. Change nothing else. Just place your shoes by the door." I was confused. I told him I needed to transform my entire life. He shook his head. He said, "You think self-control is a battle you win through force. This is why you always lose. The samurai way is different. We don't fight ourselves. We disappear the fight entirely." Takeshi felt something shift in his chest. Every approach he'd tried had been about fighting harder, resisting more, building stronger walls against his impulses. What did it mean to disappear the fight? His grandfather's next entry. I placed my shoes by the door. It felt absurdly small, meaningless. But I did it. The teacher said nothing about it when I returned. Instead, he asked me to describe exactly what I noticed when I placed them, the texture of the shoes, the sound they made, the feeling in my shoulders as I bent down. He was teaching me something I didn't yet understand. The teacher had told him, "When you try to control yourself through force, you split yourself in two. One part wants, the other part forbids. And these two parts war endlessly." The samurai discovered that self-control isn't about winning this war. It's about never starting it. We train the self to move as a whole, with no division, no internal enemy. Chapter 3. The first principle, Mizu no Kokoro. Takeshi kept reading through the night. His grandfather described weeks of seemingly pointless instructions. Place the shoes. Fold the towel in the morning. Drink water from the same cup. Each action tiny, each done with complete attention. And slowly his grandfather began to understand. The teacher called it Mizu no Kokoro, mind like water. He explained it this way. When you throw a stone into still water, the water responds perfectly to the size of the stone. Not too much, not too little. Then it returns to stillness. Your mind should be the same. When a desire arises, you acknowledge it fully, without judgment, and then you return to stillness. You don't fight the ripple. You don't try to freeze the water. You let it move and settle naturally. Takeshi's grandfather wrote about the first time he truly practiced this. He'd been walking to the teacher's house and passed his favorite restaurant. The craving hit him hard, the usual overwhelming urge to stop, to deviate from his plan, to give in. Normally, he would either resist with gritted teeth until he gave in anyway, or he would surrender immediately. This time, he stopped walking. He stood still. He felt the craving fully, the tightness in his chest, the saliva in his mouth, the mental images of the food. He named it silently. Craving is here. And then he observed it the way he'd observed the sensation of placing his shoes, without fighting, without feeding. Within 60 seconds, the intensity had halved. Within 2 minutes, his body released it naturally. He walked on. Not through willpower, through understanding. The teacher later explained, most people fail at self-control because they either suppress their desires, which makes them grow stronger in the dark, or they express every desire immediately. The samurai Ifurifurai way is different. You give the desire complete attention, like a guest you respect, and then you watch it leave on its own. No desire is permanent. All of them are passing weather. Chapter 4. The breaking point. Weeks later, Takeshi's grandfather relapsed. He'd been maintaining his small practices perfectly, feeling a sense of growing stability. Then a work crisis hit. Stress overwhelmed him, and he found himself falling back into old patterns, eating chaotically, sleeping irregularly, avoiding responsibilities. The shame was crushing. He went to the teacher's house, ready to confess his failure and hear that he'd wasted everyone's time. The teacher poured tea. He listened to the confession, then he said something that changed everything. Good. Now, you've learned the second principle. Shippai wa hiniku. Failure is fertilizer. The samurai didn't train to become perfect, they trained to become whole. And wholeness includes failure. Your mistake wasn't the relapse. Your mistake is thinking the relapse means you've undone all your progress. You haven't. The practices you built are still inside you. You've just learned where your breaking point is. Now you can prepare for it differently. He taught Takeshi's grandfather something new. When the pressure comes, when the chaos arrives, you don't try to maintain your normal state. You shift into a different mode. The samurai called it Arashi no Kamai, storm stance. You reduce everything to the absolute essential. One practice, one anchor. Even if everything else falls apart, you protect that one thing. Maybe it's 3 conscious breaths in the morning. Maybe it's washing your face with intention. One unbreakable thing. This is how you weather storms without losing yourself completely. Takeshi's grandfather practiced this through the next crisis and the next. Each time he held to one small practice, even when everything else collapsed. And each time he found that rebuilding was faster, easier, because he'd never completely lost the foundation. Chapter 5. The identity shift months passed. Takeshi read how his grandfather stopped thinking of himself as someone trying to build self-control. The practices had become part of how he moved through the world. He wasn't resisting desires anymore. He was observing them, understanding them, choosing his responses from a place of calm rather than conflict. The teacher introduced the deepest principle, mu no jiko, the self of no self. He said, "You've been trying to control yourself as if you are a thing that can be controlled, but you are not a fixed thing. You are a process, a river." The samurai discovered that when you stop defending a rigid identity, I am disciplined, I am undisciplined, you become free to respond to each moment freshly. This is true self-control, not forcing the self into a shape, but allowing the self to flow naturally in alignment with your deepest values. Takeshi's grandfather described the moment this clicked. He was facing a major temptation, something that in the past would have consumed him with internal battle. But this time, there was no battle. He simply observed the temptation, felt it completely, and noticed that beneath it was a deeper need. Not for the thing itself, but for comfort, for escape from discomfort. He sat with the discomfort instead. And the temptation dissolved, not through resistance, through understanding. He wrote, "I finally understand. Self-control isn't about controlling the self. It's about understanding the self so deeply that harmful patterns lose their power." Chapter 6. The ripple effect. The changes in his grandfather's life became visible to everyone. His work improved. His relationships deepened. His mother told him he seemed different, more present, more steady. His grandfather wrote about how strange it felt to be on the other side. People asked him for advice. They assumed he had incredible willpower, but he knew the truth. He had less willpower than before because he needed it less. The compulsions had quieted. The internal war had ended. The teacher told him during their final meeting, "You came to me seeking strength to fight yourself. You leave having made peace with yourself." This is the secret the samurai understood. The strongest warriors were not those who could force themselves to do anything. They were those who had integrated all parts of themselves into a harmonious whole. No inner enemy, no inner battle, just clear action, arising from clear understanding. Chapter 7. The System Revealed. Takeshi closed the journal as dawn light crept through his window. His grandfather had written a summary on the final pages. The complete system. It wasn't about willpower. It was about these principles practiced in order. Start with one tiny practice done with complete attention. Build the foundation of presence before trying to change behavior. Practice Mizu no Kokoro. Observe your desires without fighting or feeding them. Learn to let impulses arise and pass naturally. When you fail, practice shippai wahiniku. Treat failure as information, not identity. Use it to understand your patterns better. In times of chaos, enter arashi no kamae, reduce to one essential practice and protect it absolutely. Gradually, dissolve the rigid self-image through mu no jiko. Stop defending who you think you should be and respond to each moment from your deepest values. The system wasn't about building walls against yourself. It was about removing the walls inside yourself. Chapter 8. The First Step. Takeshi sat at his desk. He didn't feel motivated. He didn't feel suddenly transformed. But something had shifted. He understood now that his approach had been backwards. He'd been trying to control himself through force, which only created more division, more conflict, more failure. He decided to start exactly as his grandfather had. One practice. Tonight, before sleeping, he would place his shoes by the door. Tomorrow morning, he would notice them there. He would feel the texture as he put them on. That was all. No grand transformation, no massive goals, just one tiny practice done with complete attention. He knew this was the beginning of something. Not because it would be easy, but because for the first time he understood the actual path. The samurai hadn't mastered self-control through superhuman willpower. They'd mastered it by ending the internal war entirely. Chapter 9. Your turn. You've heard the story now. You understand what your struggle with self-control actually is, an internal war that can never be won through force. The samurai way offers something different, not a battle plan, but a path to peace. So here's what I want you to do. Don't try to change everything. Don't make massive resolutions. Choose one tiny practice, something so small it feels almost meaningless. Place your shoes by the door. Drink water from the same cup each morning. Take 3 conscious breaths before getting out of bed. Do this one thing with complete attention for 7 days. Not to build discipline, but to build presence. To train yourself to move through one action without division, without conflict. In the comments, tell me the one practice you're choosing. One sentence. Let it be the first step on a different path. Not a path of fighting yourself, but a path of understanding yourself. The path the samurai walked. The path that leads not to control, but to freedom. The war is over. It's time to begin.